Well, the future of your local council is once again under the microscope as the state government launches a review of councils across the metropolitan area. It comes on the heels of a 3-year effort to encourage voluntary amalgamations across the state, an effort which, it must be said, produced very few volunteers among the state's 139 councils. This review is being conducted by an independent panel, but there's a clear sense that amalgamations remain the key item on the government's reform agenda. The local government minister is John Castrilli. Mr Castrilli, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Andrew.
Can you tell me, what's your real agenda here? Are you looking for bigger councils and fewer of them?
What I'm looking for is local governments with a greater capacity to service their communities, to reconnect with their communities. You know, not much has changed really in Western Australian local government for 100 years. In the metropolitan area, we've had 73,000 people 100 years ago. And the structure of local government, I mean, it's changed around the edges, but not much has changed in 100 years. And, you know, sort of the West Australian Local Government Association, the organisation looking after local governments itself, they did a report which took them 4 years to do, but said we need to change. Previous reports of government said we must change. We have to reform local government because if we don't, we're in real serious doubt about delivering.
So that's a yes to bigger councils and fewer of them?
I never put a size on it. I never put a number on it. What I wanted to do is local government, because I wanted to do it, and they said, by the way, that we, the industry, we need to do it. And so I said to them, yes, okay, do it. You come back to me and you tell me what you think is the optimal size, shape of local government should be. That basically failed.
So why did that process fail?
Well, you know, sort of it's a voluntary process. And when you've got an institution which has been around for 100 years plus, which hasn't changed, and it's the last state in Western Australia's the last state to change, I mean, it takes time to change things around. They've been doing the same thing for the same way for nearly 100 years. And at least I had to start a conversation. I started the conversation. Of course, it takes time.
Now, you had started that process with 139 councils, yes, and a desire to have a reduced number of councils. Yes. How many councils have you got now?
Well, there's one that's there's been a reduction. Geraldton Greenough and Mullawa have amalgamated, and there are others in the pipeline which hopefully in a few months' time they're ticking off, and they'll be looking at whether they proceed with down the amalgamation path or not.
So that's the councils that are in these regional transition groups. But even some of them are walking away from it, aren't they? I mean, Subiaco, Nedlands, that merger looks like it's dead in the water now, doesn't it?
Well, that fell apart because Subiaco did not refer that to the advisory board. Bearing in mind that regional transition group, Subiaco and Netherlands, they themselves got together to explore the opportunities. They came to me for financial assistance. I gave them the financial assistance. They got KPMG to do their mergers and acquisition paper, if you like. They came up with the fact that just on pure operational savings, if those two got together, they would save between $3.1 million and $4.4 million every year. Subiaco then decided not to proceed with it. They didn't even take that report and ask their people about whether they think whether they should proceed with the amalgamations or not.
Has there been any detailed analysis of why this reform process has failed? Because I would have thought that would have been the starting point before you kicked off another leg of this.
No, I mean, it failed because Subiaco decided not to proceed with it.
No, I'm talking about a broader sense. You know, you've got 139 councils to start with.
Yes.
You've had one successful amalgamation in 3 years.
And there's others in the pipeline. And there's regional transition groups that are already doing what I've asked them to do and going very well, like the Kimberley and the Pilbara. So, like I said, there's about 50% of local governments have actually put up their hands that they want to do it.
But I would have thought you would have a detailed analysis and you'd try to understand why councils like Subiaco and Nedlands have walked away from it.
Well, I mean, I don't want to speculate as to why. All I can tell you...
Don't you need to understand that if you're going to convince them?
Well, look, Subiaco and Nedlands, when you've got an organisation like KPMG, who have got a fairly good reputation around this state and around the world, I would have thought, when they come up with a report that says there are inherent benefits to your community, and just in operational savings you will save between $3.1 million and $4.4 million every year. Forget about asset rationalisation, that's another layer. Surely you would have thought in terms of the democratic process, you would go to your community and say, look, here's the good, the bad and the ugly. This is what the report says. Let's let let the people vote on whether they should amalgamate or not.
But in terms of the democratic process, for example, Nedlands changed its mind, didn't it? After an election, the composition of the council changed, Nedlands changed its mind. So I would have thought you can't get much more democratic than that.
Well, you know, there's a whole ways of looking at all this, you know. I mean, local government, I can tell you, the disconnect between local governments and the electorate, we've had this year, I think, in this election, we've had about a 30% turnout of electors. 2 years ago it was about 32% turnout in electors. There is a growing disconnect, and what I want local government to do is through their community planning is go back and reconnect with their community, and I think you'll get a greater turnout.
I guess this issue of connecting with the community was one of the things that you looked at while you were on this overseas study tour. I was curious about the councils that you visited over there, because some of them are very, very large. What relevance does their experience have to the WA experience, do you think?
Well, I was looking for councils that were sort of leaders in the reform process and who could demonstrate measurable benefits to their community through the reform process, and then take away some lessons from that and work up policies for Western Australia to enhance the benefits to the community of Western Australia. That's what I did.
But these councils were huge though, weren't they? Like Birmingham, it's got a budget of, what, $3.5 billion, 120 elected members, a 10-member cabinet. It's got 53,000 employees. I mean, that's more people than Qantas has got.
Well, it is. But,
how can that be relevant when you're talking about councils the size of Subiaco and Nedlands?
The way you run a business, the principles are the same. It doesn't matter how big or how small you are. And they were operating in silos. They recognised the fact that they could not do and continue to do the things the way they were doing things. They saw that.
Now, people were quite sceptical about the voluntary amalgamation process. They saw it as a cover for ultimately forcing councils to amalgamate. Are we getting to that point? Are you getting to the point where once you get these recommendations, you'll be telling councils what they're going to do?
No, the metropolitan, the panel that's reviewing the metropolitan area, it's left up to them. They will look at it all.
Your reform process at the moment, you'd have to say, is proceeding at a pace that's could only be described as glacial. I mean, at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to make a decision if you want these things to happen. Presumably, you don't want to be here 3 years from now and have only one metropolitan council amalgamated.
Well, I don't think that'll happen, because the metropolitan area and the local governments have got some great support now from them to say, you know, we've gone through the shock and awe at the beginning. We need to do it. They've recognised the fact that we need to do it, and we just have to do it.
Minister, we'll watch the process with interest. Many thanks for your time.
Thanks very much.